How you doing, guys? It's Kyle from Markham Reptiles, and today I'm going to be answering all of your questions about getting a ball python. So before we start, I just want to shout out this girl right here. This is Pumpkin. She's a pastel yellow belly Het Pi ball python, and she is the mother of a clutch this year. So she is the dom to one of our clutches this year. She laid 8 beautiful eggs, and she's starting to get some of her weight back here. She's looking really sweet. For those of you guys who know anything about breeding, they drop a lot of weight, these females, when they lay eggs. And she's typically one of our biggest ball pythons, but she's actually a bit more slender than she usually is. But I've gotten quite a few meals back in her. So she's starting to look good again. And Pumpkin is just a really sweet girl, just like most ball pythons. But today's questions came from our friend Arachnid Cat. Arachnid Cat actually came up with the idea for this video. Go check her out. She's a super cool, supportive person. And I'm going to put all of her links in the description below. This idea came from Arachnid Cat, and a lot of these questions came from Arachnid Cat, who is thinking about getting her first ball python. Now, I also asked you guys this question on Instagram. And usually when we ask questions on Instagram, we do a top 5 list. And we only address the top 5 answers. But today I'm going to be answering all of the questions that you guys put on Instagram, just to make sure that anyone who's out there that's trying to get their first ball python really has an answer to any question they could possibly have. And in the spirit of answering questions, if you are looking for your first ball python and you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments if I did not address them in this video, and I will address them for you. But we definitely will be answering a bunch of questions today. The first question we have is, what is the ideal feeding schedule once you get your snake home? Now, a hatchling ball python, you can definitely be feeding it once a week. And when it gets a bit older than that, you can usually move it to every 2 weeks. And I'd say that you'd move it around a year, 2 years old. Somewhere in that range, you would move it to every 2 weeks. And then when they get older than that, you can start doing them every 3 weeks to a month, depending how old that animal actually is and what size prey you're giving it. If you're feeding an animal less often, you're obviously going to be wanting to do bigger meals. A girl like Pumpkin right here could actually take a large rat, but that'd be good enough for Pumpkin for an entire month. So I actually feed her smaller meals than that and more often, especially right now since I'm getting her weight back on her. But I'm a breeder, you guys. If you're just keeping a pet and you had a girl like Pumpkin right here, you could definitely give her a large rat every month and she would totally be fine. Now with a ball python, you should not really be aiming to feed anything larger than a large rat. A large rat is actually a big meal. A lot of adult females that I have only really get to medium rats anyways. But Pumpkin is actually usually a bigger girl. She's a bit slender right now, like I said, but she's getting some of it back. But she can definitely handle a large rat. So this is one that I could feed a large rat once a month. But a hatchling, you're going to be giving them something like a small, medium, or large mouse, depending on their size and their age, about every week. And that should be fine. Now, schedules are something that humans come up with, right? Obviously, these guys don't have schedules in the wild, so be sure to pay attention to your animal. Has it defecated yet since it last ate? That is something that's very important. Ball pythons, I give a bit more wiggle room than some of my other snakes, but I have snakes that I keep that I will not feed until they have defecated. My green tree python Chuckles, for example, I will not feed Chuckles until Chuckles has defecated. That way there's not too much buildup happening inside Chuckles. I don't let these snakes get too backed up. So do pay attention to it with your ball pythons as well. If your ball python has defecated, that's usually a sign that you're all clear to feed them. Now, it doesn't mean you have to feed them, like I said. If you have an older snake and you're feeding it heavier meals, like a large rat, for example, in the case of Pumpkin right here, if I feed her a large rat and I'm waiting a month before I feed her again, and let's say she defecates in 2 weeks, that doesn't mean I have to go ahead and feed her again. Go ahead and give their organs that break, because their organs do swell up, and digesting puts these animals through a process that can put age on them quickly. So if you want to have your animal for a long time, pay attention to their digestion, and their digestion actually will tell you when to feed them. The next question we have is, should you try to feed your snake as soon as you get it home? It really depends. It depends how the snake is settling in. It depends on the comfortability level. I would try sometimes. I would try sometimes the same day I get a snake to feed it. Now, that being said, that would usually be if I got it in the morning. if I give it some space until nighttime. And I do feed these guys at night. I did another video on feeding ball pythons, specifically frozen thawed, but that'll be a topic I'll have to cover again, because ball pythons constantly pose people food problems, but they're not really that difficult if you can get them down pat. So I'll have to make another video on that again. But yeah, sometimes I would feed that animal the same day. Sometimes I would wait a week and feed it. It depends when that animal ate last and that animal's comfortability level as well. Is that animal appearing to be settled into its new environment? If it's not settled into its new environment all the way, I might not feed it. But if it just goes and settles right in, I might feed it that same night, just to let it know, hey, you're in a new place, but you're going to get food here too. And go ahead and establish that good feeding routine. Here with me to answer this next question, we have this beautiful Orange Dream clown Het Pi ball python. This is cross, and he's actually the father to the last snake you saw, Pumpkin's clutch, this year. So Orange Dream mixed with Yellow Belly makes some bright orange snakes, especially when you mix it in with pied. So basically, when we mixed this guy cross to Pumpkin, they both are het for pied, meaning they don't visually show it, but they carry the trait. So we're hoping for some orange-looking pied snakes from them. So definitely keep an eye out on their eggs. They should be hatching here within the next couple weeks, and that'll be super cool. But the next question we have here is, does adding things like foliage and cork bark increase your animal's comfortability level and allow it to come out more and also eat better? Yes. In a short answer, yes. The more things that you add to the cage, like hides, like foliage, it absolutely can encourage your animal to be more comfortable and feel more hidden. And because of that, your animal may be more comfortable exploring more, and it definitely will be more comfortable eating. So yes, the answer to that question is yes. The next question is, what is the ideal temperature to keep the snake at night? Well, I keep my ball pythons between 88 and 90 degrees. I actually usually keep mine around 88 during the day, and I do night drop a couple of degrees. I night drop all of my snakes, but I'm a breeder, you guys. You guys don't necessarily need to night drop at all for these snakes. These guys originate from West Africa. It's super hot where they're from, and they're actually hiding underground in termite mounds because it's so hot above ground that above ground it could be over 100 degrees, and below ground it's actually going to be closer to that 88, 90 range, and that's below ground. So these guys come from a pretty hot area. I'm sure it does get a little cooler at night, but not significantly. And also, these are captive bred snakes at this point. You could not drop night temperatures at all and still have a ball python successfully reproduce for you. These guys have been captive bred for 40, 50 years now. So some of that stuff is kind of under our control now. If they're healthy and they're at 88 degrees, you can leave them at 88 degrees overnight. If you want to give them a night drop and see, if their behavior changes, I would only do a couple of degrees. These guys do need a good amount of heat. So just a couple of degrees down from what you're keeping them at during the day is definitely a good enough night drop. And to be honest, you really don't have to do a night drop at all as a pet keeper. The next question we have is, when is the best time to handle your snake? First of all, ball pythons are nocturnal, so their feeding drive kicks up at night. I feed mine at night, so you may get that food response action at night. If I open up my ball python enclosures at night, I'm going to get a bunch of snakes that are back and ready to eat, but that doesn't mean I can't pick them up. I could reach in and pick them up still. I just have to pick more carefully where on the body I'm going to pick them up, because if I go right in front of their face, you could potentially take a bite. That being said, a bite from a ball python is not bad at all. But you don't want to handle these guys right after they eat. You want to let them digest, especially if you're giving a bigger meal like we talked about earlier. You're going to want to give them that 3-4 days to really digest. If it's a smaller meal, a couple of days after they eat, I would definitely leave them alone. Other than that, they're your pet. Just handle them whenever you want. You know what I mean? They get a little irritated in shed. I don't like to overly handle them in shed. But other than that, I handle my snakes whenever I feel like it. They're my pets, and if they don't mind being handled, I don't mind handling them. So really, to me, any time almost is a good time, unless they're in shed or they've eaten. I will even sometimes handle mine in shed if I need to move them around to clean or something like that. But I try not to overly handle them in shed. It's not like they get bitey in shed or something like that. But I know it just doesn't feel comfortable to them. And I want my snakes to feel as comfortable as possible. Next question we have is, should you keep your hands warm while handling snakes? And the answer to that is your hands will keep themselves warm. Our body temperature is already 98.7 degrees. So really, we are like a natural hotspot for these animals. So though Cross here is out here in a room temperature room with me right now, his enclosure is set to 88, but the room is room temperature. He's good because he is on a hotspot, and I am actually the hotspot. I am a 98-degree hotspot, and he's right here chilling on me right now. So he has that mixture of the ambient air that's room temperature, but I can actually feel it in him. He's heating up a bit just from being on my arm here. So no, you don't have to keep your hands warm when you're handling a snake because your body's naturally going to keep itself warm. And that's the big difference between us warm-blooded animals and these cold-blooded animals that have to pick up their warmth from their environment. All right, you guys, here with me for this next question, we actually have Maui. And Maui is a guy that we produced. This is Pepper's son. I'll actually show you Pepper later in this video. So remember that name. This is Pepper's son right here. But Maui is a blackhead clown-pied ball python. He is absolutely beautiful, and he is from a clutch of ball pythons that we produced last year right here at Markham Reptiles. So Maui is an absolutely beautiful snake, you guys. He's one of my favorite animals. I just love the pattern on this guy. The pattern reminded me of something like a Hawaiian sunset or something like that. So that's why we went with the Hawaiian name for this guy. And he really is just a super cool snake. And he actually should be big enough to breed next year, which will be super cool. So hoping to get some really cool offspring from Maui. The males can breed a lot faster than the females. Females, it takes like 4 years to get them ready to breed, but males can breed closer to like 2 years. And it's a lot of it is weight-based as well. And this guy is soon approaching the weight where he can breed. As you guys can see, this guy slams food. So he definitely should be breeding for us next year, and that'll be pretty cool, so keep an eye on that. Our next question is, how long can your snake last outside of its enclosure? And that's a really good question. I kind of addressed it in the last answer. Now, it really depends what you're doing. Are you holding the snake and giving it that natural hotspot of your body being 98.7 degrees? Or is the snake sitting on a couch and watching a movie with you? Or is the snake roaming around on the ground and just getting some mental stimulation? Or whatever you want to be doing, is the snake touching you or not is an important factor. The snake can actually go for a bit longer touching you than not touching you because you are, of course, a hot spot. Most people, their house isn't going to be hotter than would be good for the snake. But if you took the snake outside on a super hot day or something like that, I would definitely limit that type of activity because hot can actually be a lot more dangerous to these reptiles than cold can. But obviously, don't take these snakes outside when it's cold either. I really just take them out if it's like 75 degrees and up. And really, that sweet spot is like 75 to 85. After that, it's pretty much too hot or too cold to really take these guys outside. But if you have them just chilling out in your house, let's say your house is like 70 degrees. Usually, I try to limit to like 30 minutes or an hour. If you watch a movie once in a while with the snake, it's not the end of the world. I would just make sure that I'm not doing that every single day, keeping the snake out for 2 or 3 hours, because its temperature is not right, its humidity is not right, and over time that could build up and affect the snake. So I really like to limit it to 30 minutes to an hour. You probably could get away with a little more, but that's how long I like to keep the snake out just to be safe. So our next question is, how big will they get? And this is actually a super common question. So here we have Maui. And like I said, Maui is about a year old now. But I'm going to go ahead and put Maui down for a second and show you his mother, Pepper. So Pepper is not our biggest female. Pumpkin is actually usually our biggest female. But Pepper is a girl that has not laid yet this year. So she has some of that extra weight on her. And you can see right here, this is pretty much the size of an adult female ball python. And this is one that we're getting ready to breed this year. She looks good. She has good body weight. And if you notice, she looks a lot different than Maui. Maui right here is a blackhead clown-pied ball python, as I stated before. And his mom is just carrying a lot of hets. She's actually a pastel het clown, het pied ball python. So she just carries those genes. She does not visibly show them in the same way that Maui does. Maui visibly shows these genes. So literally his genetics came from his mother right here, and she's actually in shed, as you can see from her belly. His mom, Pepper, right here, is pretty much the typical size for an adult ball python, and they can get thicker than this. They usually really don't get much longer than this. This is about, how long they get. And she is about 6 years old. So you have some time before you go from this animal to this animal. And if you follow us closely, we'll be hatching out babies here in the next couple weeks. So you'll see the babies are like half the size or less than this. So you have a full year just to get to this. And you have about 6 years before you get to this. But I'd say she's probably been close to the same size since about 4 years old or something like that. All right, you guys, for this next question, we actually have our boy Joker right here. And Joker is a clown pie ball python. And he's actually an adult breeder male. As you can see, he's right in there. And he is perfect to use for this next answer. And the answer is, do they bite and why aren't you scared? Well, they can bite because they have a mouth. As you can see right here, Joker has a mouth. But ball pythons are called ball pythons for a reason. If they don't feel comfortable, like Joker didn't feel comfortable right away when I first picked him up, they'll go into a ball. When they're comfortable, they'll stretch out just like this. But yeah, they're called ball pythons for a reason. They naturally will just curl into a ball if they feel threatened. These are one of the most docile, sweet snakes that actually exist as far as generalizing a whole species. Now, you do have outliers. You could get that one snake with just a little bit of attitude. But in general, your ball python likely is not going to bite you. And if they do bite you, it's for one of two reasons. They're being defensive, which typically ball pythons really are not defensive. Or they think that you are food, which they have these heat pits right here in the front of their face. As you guys can see, Joker has a bunch of heat pits right here. All those holes around his lips are actually heat pits. And they sense heat. So if for some reason I was doing something like maybe thawing a rat out in this room, which don't hold your snakes when you're thawing rats out, you guys. But if I was thawing a rat out in this room and I went in to pick up Joker, he would smell the rat and he would see my hand coming in, and he might bite my hand by mistake if I did something like that. And that would be called a food response bite. But this animal has a mouth. It can bite you. But like your dog, it really depends a lot on personality, and these guys' bite is nowhere near as bad as a dog bite. And I have been bit by a ball python before, but it was just one ball python that I've ever gotten a bite from, and I've handled hundreds of ball pythons. So it really doesn't happen often, and they're not as jumpy and antsy as some other species are. They're actually really calm snakes, which I think contributes to them being so docile as well, is they're really not that nervous as far as snakes go in general. So I wouldn't worry too much about your ball python biting you. If you do end up with a ball python that actually will bite you, it would be super cool. I would actually love that, but you can easily tame them out. I love to work with snakes that bite and tame them out, but you could easily tame a ball python out. It's not difficult. Just keep picking it up, show it that you're not a threat, and that will go away. And these bites are nothing, you guys. They would literally just leave maybe small dots on your skin. And a bite from an adult ball python like this wouldn't even hurt as much as a paper cut. So just keep that in mind, you guys. The bark's a lot worse than the bite when it comes to snakes. And the suspense of getting bit is a lot worse than getting bit. But to be honest, these guys don't even bark. They're absolutely beautiful snakes. And I don't mean that literally, of course. You know they don't bark. But these guys won't threaten you a whole bunch either. They're super docile. There's a reason that these are one of the easiest to handle snakes that exist. And you don't have to worry too much about a ball python biting you or not biting you to begin with. The next question is, how long do they live? And the answer is, if you're taking good care of them, they should live over 20 years. These guys have actually been known to live upwards of 30 years in the wild and even in captivity. And these guys are a very long-lived animal. So when you get one, just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. You're not doing an impulse buy or anything like that, and that you're going to take care of this animal for the next 20 plus years. Because if you feed this animal correctly And that means not overfeed it, because overfeeding is the main thing that shortens snakes' lives. Their organs are actually right underneath their fat layer, which is different from us. We have our organs, then we have our skeletal system, and our fat layer is on top of the skeletal system. In ball pythons, they have their skeletal system, and inside of that is the fat, and then their organs are underneath that. So their fat is right on top of their organs. So you can shorten a snake in general's life significantly by overfeeding it. You don't want to overfeed these animals. So that refers back to what I was saying earlier about scheduling and just watching when the animal defecates and stuff like that. You don't need to overfeed these animals. And if you do that and you take care of this animal correctly, these guys can live a long, happy, healthy life. The next question I have is it easy? And to be honest, for me, as far as comparatively, it is a lot easier to take care of ball pythons as opposed to other snakes. And snakes in general are a pretty easy pet. Like I said, at most you're feeding them once a week, and you don't have to clean up poops that often and stuff like that. It's not like having a dog where you got to take it, walk it every day and stuff like that. It's a lot easier than that. But that being said, you can't just set it and forget it with these guys. You do have to check on them. You do have to observe your animal. And the more observation you do and the more you actually pay attention to these guys, the better keeper you will actually be. So if you want to be a really good keeper and stuff like that, you definitely want to be paying more attention. You shouldn't just leave these guys and forget about them. You have to still take care of them. They're a living animal that, like I said, lives 20 plus years. So still pay attention to them, but they're not as difficult as taking care of a dog or a cat or something like that. The next question that we have is, what do they eat? They eat mice or rats. These guys, they are rodent eaters, and that's what they eat. Now, if you're picking up a ball python, an important thing to ask is it eating live or frozen thawed? Because then you know whether you have to deal with a live rodent or just buying frozen thawed rodents and defrosting them and warming them up a bit in some water or whatever like that. You know, it's a lot different than dealing with a live rat or something of that nature. So you definitely need to be very careful feeding live. I don't feed any of my snakes live right now. And when these new babies hatch out, I'm going to get them all on frozen thawed as well. So I make it a point to get all my ball pythons on frozen thawed. And you guys should definitely watch my video about live feeding versus frozen thawed feeding. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that in the description so you can dive into that as well and learn a bunch about that topic, because there are some pros and cons to each. But I'll let you guys decide after you watch that video. But I definitely feed all my stuff frozen thawed, and that is not necessarily the industry norm. So definitely ask people if your snake is eating frozen thawed or not. The next question is enclosure size, and that really depends if you have a baby or an adult. For an adult ball python, if it's a pet for you, a really nice enclosure would actually be like what I have behind me right here. And this is just a 4 by 18 inches by 18 inches. Something like that would be a great enclosure for a ball python, as long as you give them plenty of places to hide and stuff like that. Ball pythons do actually do well in rack systems as well. So, you know, maybe I should do a video on that in the future. Like I said, originally they come from West Africa, where they live in termite mounds underground, and they eat the rodents that go through the tunnels and the termite mounds. So rack systems actually are perfect for this type of snake. Now, that being said, if you put this snake in too small of a rack where it's literally squeezing the snake, that's abuse. So, you know, there's limits to everything. Everything can be done in a good way or a bad way. If you give these guys enough space, a rack system is fine. It's really the same thing as a cage if it has enough space in it. But for a big female adult ball python, what I have behind me right here is actually probably the perfect cage. I like PVC because it keeps in a lot of that humidity. Remember, fish tanks were originally made for fish. So unless you're going to modify it like I did right here to my green tree python enclosure, I took away what would have been a screen top, I put in an acrylic door, and I turned it on its side. This is now modified to hold heat and humidity a lot better. Unless you're going to do something like this, then something like this is perfect. Something like this would actually be great for a younger animal. So if you are going to modify something, you could do something like this for relatively cheap. Find a 10-gallon aquarium, on Facebook Marketplace, on Craigslist. People throw them out and literally list them for free. And then you could just buy this front attachment. I'm not sponsored by them, but I got this one from iHeartGeckos. So I'll go ahead and link them in the description in case you want to buy this modification right here. All you do is silicone it on. I don't remember if they send you the silicone or not. I have a lot of silicone sitting around for some reason. But this thing is actually really cool. So for a younger animal, that would work great. Now, you do have to remember with something like this, they're going to be uncomfortable because you can see them. So if you don't have a really confident animal, you got to give them a lot of hides and stuff like that. And for a ball python, it's obviously different than for this green tree python that I have sitting right here that's just comfortable because it's on a perch. So with ball pythons, you want to give them lots of hiding spaces. You just want to make sure that their enclosure is meeting their temperature and humidity requirements. They actually need a bit more humidity than a lot of people really realize. I like to keep them around 60% humidity if we're going to put a number on it. And you can really tell if their humidity is correct by whether or not they're having good sheds. So they are super adaptable animals. You could keep them in a variety of things. But if you want to just chalk it up to one enclosure for an adult, I would say behind me, this 4 by 18 inches by 18 inches is great. They don't really need the extra height of a 4 by 2. They don't really climb. They will go over top of things, but they don't really climb. So like that means if like a water bowl or something is in their way, they will go over top of that to get to the other side. But they're not going to go up on a branch and perch like a green tree python or something like that. So you don't need to worry as much about height. But a 4-foot enclosure would give them plenty of space to move around. But you just want to make sure you're giving them plenty of hides so they don't feel too exposed and open. Because if your ball python feels too exposed and open, it actually will not eat. So big shout out to you guys for asking those questions. Big shout out to you, Arachnid Cat, for suggesting this video. Like I said, I linked her in the description, you guys. Anyone whose comment I used, you're linked in the description as well. Keep an eye out on this guy right here. He is a dad this year. So Joker fathered one of our clutches this year. Keep an eye out for some beautiful clown pie babies that look like this guy. They should be hatching out within the next couple weeks. If you're thinking about getting a ball python, definitely go for it. Let me know if this video helped you guys answer some of your questions. And like I said, if you have a question on something that I did not address in the video, go ahead and drop that in the comments below, and I got you. I'll answer it for you. I will respond. I read every single comment. So thank you guys for all your positive comments and for keeping me going. You guys are the reason that I make YouTube videos like this. So you guys have a wonderful day and carry on loving these animals because they are absolutely beautiful.